Hi, welcome to My Favorite Mistake. I'm your host, Mark Graben. Our guest today is Terry Whalin. He's an editor and author of more than 60 books, and he's written for more than 50 magazines. So several of Terry's books have sold over 100,000 copies. His latest book, I've got a copy of it here, is 10 Publishing Myths, Insights Every Author Needs to Succeed. Terry is owner of Whalin and Associates, a full-service editing, writing, and communications firm, and he is also an acquisitions editor for Morgan James Publishing. So joining us from Southern California, welcome, Terry. How are you?
Mark, wonderful to be here with you. Thank you so much.
I'm jealous of your Southern California weather this time of year as we record in mid-December. I hope you're enjoying that.
Yeah, it's pretty great, and people do envy us all over the country the way the weather is this time of year.
Yeah. So being in that weather, not a mistake, not what we're here to talk about. I will have a lot of questions for you about, writing and editing and publishing mistakes. We'll see if I've made any of them as you talk us through some of these. But, first off, and, generally speaking, looking at your career, Terry, first things first, what's your favorite mistake?
Well, Mark, my favorite mistake or biggest one is the way I look at it is it really happened in 2007. Mark Victor Hansen, the co-author on Chicken Soup for the Soul, invited me out to California. He was having Mega Book Marketing University out there. And I was a literary agent back then. I was living in the Phoenix, Arizona area. So it was pretty inexpensive for him to send me from there out to Los Angeles. I got out there and took pitches from people during that conference, but I also sat with everybody else and listened to the different speakers. And one of the things that happened to me during that event, it's almost like I woke up from being asleep as an author because at that point in my life, I'd published about 50 books. Twice, I got six-figure advances from big publishers. I was getting advances, but publishers, what they do is, either once a year or quarterly, they send you a statement of how your royalties are doing. Mm-hmm. And I was getting mine, and they were all in the minus category because my books weren't selling and earning. And
they weren't getting past what the advance was.
Yeah, they weren't getting past the advance, and so they were all negative royalty statements that I was receiving from these publishers. And while I was there, it's almost like I woke up because I understood for the first time how little I was doing as an author to promote my own books. I mean, I had a terrywhalin.com website, but I was doing nothing else. Publishers were making pretty books. They were getting those books in the bookstore. But as an author, I was doing nothing to encourage people to go in those bookstores and buy the books and actually move them out of the bookstore. So one of the speakers during this event was the other co-author on Chicken Soup for the Soul, Jack Canfield. Mm-hmm. And Jack has written this book that I have on my shelf called The Success Principles. And the very first success principle says that I will take 100% responsibility for my own success. Mm-hmm. Now, none of us want to take 100% responsibility. We want somebody else to do it. We want our publisher, our agent, our publicist, somebody other than us to do it. Mm-hmm. But during that event, I made a decision. I made a change in my life from that mistake. I decided that I was going to take 100% responsibility for my own success. And so back then, I started blogging every week. My blog now has over 1,700 entries in it. About a year ago, I found an article that said I was one of the top 27 content producers out there with, over 600 million blogs. People had me on that list. And that's because I decided to take 100% responsibility for my own success and be doing something proactive every day, or at least several times a week, to promote my book.
Yeah, I mean, that's a lesson I've learned along the way. I know it's one of the myths in 10 publishing myths as I was going through it. And thank you again for sending me the book. Myth number 2, my publisher will sell and promote my book. I've gone, my first couple of books were through a trade publisher. So not one of the big ones. My books were not really in physical bookstores. This is all, Amazon or through the publisher's website or other online stores. So that certainly resonates with me, this idea of even if you have a publisher, a lot of it falls on you as the author.
Yeah, publishers care. They want to sell books. Don't get me wrong, but at the end of the day, their interests are really quite divided. Depending on the number of books that they publish, they've got other things to promote and do besides you, where your focus and your passion is really on your book. Mm-hmm. And that's what you really need to tap into and use as you get out there and talk to people about it.
Yeah. And that mistake that you were making of not doing enough to promote your own books, that's a very common situation. Enough for you and others to write books and do things to try to wake others up. But where do you think that was? Is that just a bad assumption? Do publishers sometimes portray that they're going to do more than they're able to do?
Yeah, there is misstatements from the publisher. I've had publishers, promise me the moon as far as what they're going to do. Then after I sign, a lot of that stuff disappears or doesn't happen. So I've had that kind of situation. But mm-hmm. I think in general, most of us as writers are introverts. I'd rather sit in the corner and read a book than stand up in front of people and talk. Yeah. And so, that alone, that characteristic, but also just our tendency, we'd rather write another book and press on to something else than do the marketing and promotion that's necessary to get our own book out there. But I just really got the message at that event that I had to be doing something mm-hmm. and something significant. Jack Canfield and Mark Victor Hansen, when the Chicken Soup for the Soul books came out, they practiced what they called the rule of 5. So they did 5 things every day to mm-hmm. promote their book. And when they finally found a publisher, they were rejected over 140 times for those Chicken Soup for the Soul books. But when they finally found a publisher, they told them that they were going to sell 1 million books in the first year. Well, the publisher laughed at them. They never sold 1 million copies of anything at that point. Yeah. It took them 1.5 years, though, Mark. Because they actually did something, and now that series is one of the best-selling series in the English language. Right. It's
millions and millions and millions. Yeah. It's almost like the old McDonald's sign of, billions served maybe at this point with that whole series. Okay. So Terry, now, with this book, you're doing, I don't know how many things today, but coming and recording this podcast is something, in addition to blogging. There's more channels to try, to get in front of people. So are you guesting on a lot of podcasts, doing more on social media, trying to do more with video in different ways?
Yeah, I am. That's a great question. Back then in 2007, there was hardly any social media. So I jumped into social media. That's why I have 175,000 followers on X, Twitter. I have 19,500 connections on LinkedIn. I ignored LinkedIn for a long time, but I'm focused on just a few social media platforms. But I'm using those platforms consistently. I'm out there posting 12, 15 times a day on those platforms. So that kind of effort, I believe, really pays off for you in the long run, because one of the things we've learned about the book business is that somebody has to really hear or see about your book, 7, 8, a dozen times mm-hmm. before they actually reach into their wallet and buy that book. So part of what you're doing on social media is just giving people that exposure to what your mm-hmm. book is, what the benefits are, that kind of thing. And it's pretty much been proven, Mark, out there that we don't sell books really through social media, but publishers are always interested in what your numbers are and
Yeah.
why that is. And that's because of that continual exposure that they know about that the book really needs in order to be able to get out there and get in people's hands.
Well, it's easy to count. It's quantifiable, whether it's meaningful to sales. That's, there's room for different assumptions or hypotheses there. But I mean, I had a publicity person I was working with once who was really, really convinced that, people might want to try to get on TV, whether that's like your local morning show or something bigger. And this publicist was convinced that, being on TV might be fun and interesting and a boost to your ego. But she was like, radio listeners, and I think by extension, podcast listeners, they actually buy books. That was her pitch anyway.
No, I think that's true. I think there is some merit to that. One of the things about publishing that's really hard for all of us that are authors is that there isn't just this firm path that we all go to sell books and be successful with that. Each of us kind of have to experiment and find our own way to move forward in that. I mean, if there was a path, every book would be a bestseller, and that certainly isn't happening. I mean, there's over 11,000 new books that come out every day with including the self-published books. That's right. A lot of material that's entering the marketplace every day.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of competition, not just for book purchase dollars, but for time and attention.
Absolutely.
Of all the options and things there are out there. It's funny you say every book can't be a bestseller. It almost seems like every author claims to be a best-selling author, which doesn't really have I don't think a real precise legal definition. It's like calling something craft whiskey. That word craft has no meaningful legal definition, but there's some books where you see. Let me ask you your thoughts on this. Does it really help sell books to claim number one Amazon bestseller, and then you go and look and say, like, this book's been out for 4 years and it has 2 reviews?
Yeah, that's a really great question, and that's actually a word at Morgan James we try to train our authors not to use. And that word is Amazon. Now, Amazon is a big customer of Morgan James, but they're only 24% of our overall business. I mean, I've seen some publishers claim that Amazon is 60% of their business. So no matter what percentage that is, you still do not want to use that word because retailers,
right, they don't want to
bookstore owners, right or wrong, they believe that Amazon's destroyed their business, and so they hate that word. They don't want to hear that at all. They don't want to hear that you have 50 Amazon reviews. Now, if you have 50 reviews, that's interesting, but not 50 Amazon reviews.
Right. Well, that's a good point. But I mean, I think there's a difference, and I know enough about the industry that there are different tricks that people use to basically buy their way onto, say, the New York Times bestseller list. But there's, I think, a difference between like legitimately selling a ton of books nationally versus I was number one for a day and a half in some relatively obscure category on Amazon. All bestsellers are not created equal.
No, that's exactly right. Yeah, there's different ways that you can look at that word bestseller as far as what that really means. That's why in the introduction I made a point of saying that several of my books have sold over 100,000 copies, and that kind of quantifies it, that indeed some of my books have done pretty well out there.
Yeah. So I want to go back at a question for you, back to the 50 books you had done previously. Was there a nagging sense of like these books should have sold more copies before you were taking 100% responsibility for that? Was there like one in particular where you thought, oh, if I'd gone about that differently, it would have really reached a bigger audience? Is there anything that you kind of lamented in particular?
Yeah, probably a number of those books as I look back. Early in my writing career, one of the things I did is I've done a lot of what we call work for hire books, where the publisher hired me to be the writer and get the book done, and then I signed over all rights to that publisher. So when you do that kind of thing, you really have less incentive, I think, to market and sell the book, as opposed to if it's a royalty kind of arrangement. But even being a hired gun, like I have been on some books, I still try to do my part as an author to to be promoting that particular book.
Mm-hmm. And with, I've never been paid advance royalties, but I think, when people talk about that advance, it's an advance on future expected royalties. I mean, is it a mistake sometimes or there are mistakes that happen in the realm of, like, if you accept the royalty and the book doesn't sell, do you have to pay any of that back, or does the publisher take the loss?
The publisher takes a loss. That's a good question. No, I've never had to pay it back. I've been in some situations where it looks like it's close that I might need to return some money, but I never have had to pay anything back. The publisher usually just takes a loss. And the true story is that most nonfiction books never earn back. So if your book does earn back its advance, even if it's a modest advance, say $5,000 you got for an advance, if your book earned back, that puts you in a different category than most of the other nonfiction authors out there.
Mm-hmm. Mm. And there's, and this is something you touch on in the book. I mean, the decision point of signing with a publisher, large or small, trying to go. I generally, I don't think self-publishing is the right label. I like to think of it as independent publishing, because my company has published my last couple of books. I certainly didn't do it all myself.
Sure.
I hired professionals the way a publisher would hire professionals or have them on staff. How do you kind of coach somebody to think through this question of, should I hold out and find a publisher, even if, as you mentioned earlier, Jack Canfield and others, you might get a lot of rejections, versus saying, okay, well, I couldn't find a publisher, I'll do it independently, versus circumstances where independent publishing might be preferred?
Yeah, no, that's a great question, and there's certainly a lot of people that are using independent publishing and all that. What the trick out there in this process, and the caution I would give people is, don't get scammed by these very persuasive sales calls that you get. Mm-hmm. But use your own resources as a writer is what I talk about in the book. Even is to we all have Google on our phones or our desktops or wherever. So put the name of that publisher and the word complaints or scam, and see what comes up. I mean, you'd be surprised. I mean, every publisher has people that don't like them, so you're going to have some complaints out there, no matter who it is. But some of these people that really we have no business publishing with them, just because they have pages and pages of people that are complaining about them and the treatment that they got from them. So just be wise about that kind of thing. Before you jump in there and sign a contract. I mean, I have met some authors that have, they've spent $20,000, to self-publish their book, and they're never going to make those funds back. They're gone. They took all the extra upsells and all the things that these people sold them, and it was just a moneymaker for that for that publisher. It had nothing to do with what the author was going to do.
Yeah. And there's a difference between, I don't know, maybe being disappointed in a legitimate publisher's performance of, well, they didn't do enough to market my book, or you fell into the myth of thinking they were
Right.
going to do that, or saying, well, it took 3 months longer than they had said. Like, those are performance issues that could pop up. I know some authors who, like, oh, the publisher forced a certain title on me and I never liked it, and I think it actually hurt the book. I mean, those are disagreements or performance issues. But yeah, I've heard others, and there have been guests on this podcast who've said, basically, don't pay somebody to publish your book. That's where the real problems, if not scams, if that word fits some cases. Like, a publisher should be working with you, and even if they're not paying you a royalty, that they shouldn't be making you pay, like in the description, the scenario you described of paying $20,000 up front to have someone else publish the book. Is that what you're?
Yeah, well, yeah, you want to
What do you
make
think?
sure you've got a true partner in this process. I mean, at Morgan James, I mean, some people don't like our model at Morgan James, which is very, very different than, but we're one of the top independent publishers.
Mm-hmm.
We've been on this list 9 times from Publishers Weekly. We've been around over 20 years. We've produced over 25 million books, 6,000 titles, 29 times on the New York Times list, and a couple of hundred times on the Wall Street Journal bestseller list.
Mm-hmm.
You can't do that kind of thing if you're not selling books in the brick and mortar bookstores, which we are, and don't have a good reputation. Mm-hmm. So, take a serious look at that publisher. Talk to some of their authors. A lot of times authors will ask me as an acquisitions editor, can I talk to some of your authors? I'm like, sure, talk to my authors, because, you're going to learn some things that you wouldn't otherwise. Most of these publishers, they don't want you to talk to their authors.
That's a bad sign.
Particularly if they're in the scam, don't use them category, mm-hmm. because you're going to hear horror stories from those people. So you're not going to really get a legitimate list of, mm-hmm. of authors you can talk to.
Yeah. So how is the model or the approach different with Morgan James, the publisher that you work for?
Well, it's different on a number of different fronts, but I spend about 45 minutes to an hour in the submission process talking to the author about the very different way that we work, because we work with the author on every step of the process. They have input to what that cover is going to look like, what the title is going to be, what's the price going to be of the book, what size is it going to be, when's it going to release in the bookstore, all those kinds of details we work with the author on. We don't just shove it down their throat and say, here it is, we're going to do it like this. Mm-hmm. We also produce the book in a shorter amount of time than most people. So you can have books from us in about 3 months after you turn in an edited manuscript, as opposed to
very fast.
Yeah, as opposed to 18, 24 months from a traditional house. And we get it in the bookstore in about 9 months. So, but yeah, we have a whole different process. The sort of the unusual thing that Morgan James does is we ask the author to commit to buying 2,000 copies of their own book. Now, they have years to buy these books, but they get the books from us at our exact print cost plus $3. Now, the print cost, you can imagine that price varies depending on the page count and size and all that kind of thing. But up front, we ask them to give us that $3 over the print price of the book. So it's the 2,000 book commitment times $3, $6,000 up front. Now, I make a point to tell people that 80% of whatever they do is going to be up to them to sell books. Mm-hmm. We're focused on the bookstores and selling books to the bookstores. We invest, $15,000, $20,000, $25,000 into every book that we publish.
Yeah.
So,
and that's a risk most any publisher is taking on. That's part of the
Yeah,
business. Yeah.
they are. There's kind of so there's a cooperative partnership. The unusual thing that Morgan James does is about a year and a half ago, we learned that if somebody gets the print copy of or the ebook copy of your book and starts to read that ebook version, there's a high probability that they're going to turn and buy the print copy of the book.
Yeah.
So our team, our marketing team, will produce a page for your book, a web page that'll have the cover. It'll have a big button that says free book and some type about the book. So if you're on a podcast like we're on and you tell people to go to that website, let's say 1,000 people went over there and downloaded your free ebook. We would send you all those email addresses. So you grow your email list by 1,000 people, which would be great. And because it's highly probable those people are going to go buy the book anyway, we count that against the book purchase requirement. So instead of 1,000 books, you only need, or 2,000, you only need 1,000 to complete it.
Yeah.
I don't know another publisher, Mark, that's actually helping authors drive print book sales and grow their email list by giving away a free ebook. That's a pretty unusual thing that we're doing out there in the market. So
that is, because I'll compare it to experience with the publisher that I long ago decided not to work with again. So for one, and I could see there's a difference. This commitment to buy books at a very good price, right? So if, like, for me as a business person, I can sell those to clients. I can give them away. The books are inexpensive enough, even with the $3, which would cover shipping and handling, and more. But a traditional publisher. Early on, I'll say this was a mistake to think I was getting a good deal. I was able to buy author copies for 40% off of retail, which is actually not a discount compared to what they would get from a retailer.
That's very, very typical. It's usually 40 to 50%, depending on what you've negotiated. And, a bookstore is going to buy them at 50% off, right there.
55% off, or yeah. And so it was hard. It was hard for me to justify buying and giving away too many clients, because then there was the pricing argument that I would have with the publisher. So anyway, the difference between, $36 for an author copy, or for my book, let me hold it upright, The Mistakes That Make Us, it's more like $4 an author copy, as buying, getting them directly from a printer. So that changes the business model, I think, quite a bit, especially for a business book, to try to use that as a lead in. You talk about the pathway from ebook, free or inexpensive, to print books. So then that also hopefully leads to clients and speaking engagements and things that are part of, let's say, my broader business model.
It does. And everybody believed when ebooks came out that they were going to overtake print books. No. But I was on a webinar with Marcus Duhay when he was the CEO of Penguin Random House, the biggest publisher out there. And he basically said that their numbers worldwide is 80% print and 20% ebook. So, people were worried that print books were going to disappear. That's not happening out there.
No, I see direct Amazon data, through my publisher login. It's roughly 75. It can fluctuate between 70 to 80% print book. But one other thing I came into disagreement with my publisher, they were happy with me giving away a free sample. They stubbornly price their ebooks basically the same as the print book, which I think misses the mark. And I see you nodding your head. Why is that a mistake? It seemed like they did not want to sell ebooks.
Well, really, ebooks are in general discounted big time, so that because they really do drive print sales. So you're wiser, I think, if you drop it to 99 cents, like people do every now and then, or you just give it away like we're doing, or but something to encourage those ebook sales, because hey, let's face it, not everybody reads electronically. I don't, even though I promote ebooks and all kinds of things too.
Right, right. So our guest today, again, Terry Whalin, has a lot of experiences in the whole range of the book writing and publishing and marketing focus. I want to ask a follow-up question. People listening, if they were to pursue through a publisher, Morgan James or otherwise. I've worked with an acquisitions editor, when I was first working with a publisher. I think people might not know what that role involves. Tell us a little bit about that job.
Yeah, as an acquisitions editor, this is actually the third publisher that I'm working for in the acquisitions area. An acquisitions editor is basically a hunter and a gatherer. I'm actually often the very first person that reads the submissions that come in. I talk to the author. I see if they've got any connections to sell books, what's their social media presence, their web presence. All that kind of data. I collect all that and talk to the author about why they wrote the book. Is it a good fit for the kinds of books that we publish at Morgan James? For example, we don't do high-end coffee table books with a lot of color pictures. We don't do poetry. Those are just some of the books that we do not do. But otherwise, we do a lot of stuff. So we receive over 5,000 submissions a year and only do about 180, 200 books. So there is definitely a sorting, sifting process to try to figure out which books we're going to publish.
It's kind of parallel to being an angel investor, of reviewing a lot of pitches and which projects are we going to put some money into or partner up on, in the hope of, no one's got a perfect crystal ball. So if you make a lot of bets and some of them are going to really work better than others.
Yeah, that's right. You do the best you can with the information you have, but we try to gather as much information to make a wise decision on these authors and these books. And even with that information, we still get some some knuckleheads, some authors that we really don't want to work with. And I'm often surprised because, I meet these people when they come in the door and they're always really nice and kind to me, but they may not be nice and kind to the rest of the members of the team. Mm. And so when they come and pitch a second book, they go, "Oh no, we don't want to work with that person anymore." And I'm like, okay, I understand.
If their interactions with the copy editors and others weren't professional or respectful.
That's right. That's one of those inside things that you really need to understand in publishing, is that it's quite a small community in a lot of ways. Mm-hmm. And if we're maybe in the same office with each other, or even virtually, we're still all talking to each other.
Sure.
So how you treat one person is going to get around to other people. So I'm always amazed in the publishing community. I mean, I've been to conferences where I meet somebody, they're a brand new publicist. They're just working for a publisher. I come back the next year, they're like the vice president of publicity. So yeah. You just got to be aware that all those relationships that you make with people are important. So treat everyone with kindness and respect, and that'll take you a long ways in this process.
For sure. A couple other questions for you here. Thinking of all the different stages of writing and marketing a book, and how some of that overlaps, of how you can start building an email list, start building your name recognition, or try to even develop some fans of your writing along the way. One of the things I've heard different opinions on is the importance of pre-sales. And doing things to specifically drive pre-sales through different retailers. What's your view on that?
Well, pre-sales are very important. As a matter of fact, we encourage our authors to work very hard at pre-sales, not just Amazon pre-sales. I mean, we're talking Barnes & Noble's, Books A Million, Chapters, Indigo in Canada. One of the things that we've learned, Mark, with the pandemic, I mean, we're in touch with the national accounts for these big entities, and we've learned through our Barnes and Noble's rep, for example, that if we can get our authors to get their people to go over to barnesandnobles.com and pre-order 300 copies of their book during that sort of window, that between 3 months and 9 months when the book comes out, if they get to the number 300, that's what really tips the scale for that national rep. And he looks at that and goes, oh, let's order those for every Barnes and Nobles in the country. And that puts your book out there in the bookstores in a totally different way than if you didn't do that pre-sale work. Now, you and I know from being in the book business that it's the author at the end of the day that really moves people to go into that bookstore, buy the book, and take it out. So the publisher can do their part of getting the book in, but a lot of people that aren't in the book business don't even understand that all the books that are there inside your bookstore are there on consignment. It's a crazy practice. It's been going on since the Great Depression in this country, but basically, if the book doesn't sell, the publisher can box that up, send it back to the publisher for a complete refund, and they destroy those books. I understand when they go back. So that's why when you go in your local Barnes and Nobles and see all these beautiful hardcovers that are in the bargain section of the bookstore, the true story on those books is they're getting ready to be boxed up and returned to the publisher.
There are 10 myths in the book. The one thing that's helpful is all of the action tips of not just, don't make the mistake of believing these myths, but there are a lot of practical tips. Even I would say I'm an experienced author. I don't pretend to know it all. The tips in here about writing magazine articles is something that I think could take advantage of. And under myth 4, there are some sub myths, I think, in here. So myth 4 says beginning writers have no chance to get published. It's not stated as directly, but I think there's sort of a myth that I flagged. It's like, well, if the book doesn't sell right away, give up on it. The book is dead. You talk about how sometimes books take a while to catch on or can have a relatively long lifespan. It sounds like it would be a mistake to give up on marketing a particular book too soon.
Yeah, well, the only person that's going to give up on a book is you. So as long as you're excited and passionate about your book, I would just keep on keeping on. And the whole magazine thing is something that many people forget. In the book publishing business, for example, if your book sells 5,000 copies over the lifetime of the book, that's a good number. We're very excited about that. In the magazine business, it's very easy to reach 100,000, 200,000, 500,000 people with your magazine article. And at the very bottom of that magazine article, it's like by Terry Whalin, and then I have a website that I send people to. That's huge. And those of us that are in publishing, the more you can get published, the better. So we basically want to publish people that have been published. I call that the catch-22 of publishing, where basically it's like when you're brand new and you got to put a resume together, but you don't have any jobs to put on that resume. What do? Well, you put something on there so you can show that at least you're trying to get a job. It's the same way in the book business. One of the best ways for you to get published is in magazines of any size, because that shows that you kind of know what the drill is. You know how to target your reader, you know how to write a headline, have a beginning, middle, end. I mean, there's a lot you can learn writing these magazine articles rather than practicing with a 50 to 100,000 word book. It's a little harder to do that.
Yeah. Would you have similar thoughts about, trying to write and submit op-eds to newspapers?
Oh, that's a great thing to do. Newspapers. I mean, there's a lot of writing possibilities out there. You just have to figure out what's the right one for you and your topic. But yes, there's a ton of publications, and they change all the time. So part of the key is to get the latest market guide and make sure you check that out. Check it out at your library. You don't have to buy the latest market guide. You can find it at your local library usually. Get that information and make sure you're sending it to the right person in the right place.
Yeah. So there's all these things that we can do as authors to promote our books. And I think, like you were saying earlier, there are certain strategies that might appeal more to, like, okay, doing more writing as a writer, that feels natural. I've tried to drag myself into more the age of doing video. I hear maybe this is more true with certain types of books than others. I've resisted doing anything on TikTok. Maybe I'm making a mistake. I've heard, what people call book talk. Supposedly helps sell a lot of books, and you don't have to do a little dance, that it could actually be just getting on camera and sharing something from your book.
There's a lot of different ways. I personally am not on TikTok, but there are people that they start a YouTube channel. I mean, there's a lot of different ways to do it. The key is to do something that you can control. I mean. Mm-hmm. I talk to authors all the time. They'll tell me, well, I built my list on Facebook, or I built my list on LinkedIn. Well, I don't own LinkedIn. I don't own Facebook. Yeah. I could violate their terms simply and get kicked off that thing tomorrow.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a risk.
Part of the key, I think, is to, whatever you're going to build it on something that you can actually control and have input to. That's why in these Mythbuster actions that you were talking about that I do at the end of every chapter, I really encourage people to do something that they can actually control at the end of the day.
Yeah. I had a previous guest having a brain cramp on her name, but she was talking about that more from the standpoint of, her entire website presence was through one of the shopping channels, and she had done really, really well, but then that relationship ended and she didn't have any of her own email list or contacts. And part of her favorite mistake was sharing that caution about building, I think she was saying, don't build your castle on someone else's land, I think is how she put it.
I think it's absolutely true, and the email list is one of the keys. I think for every author to have one of those. If you don't have one, start building it, start using it consistently, and getting it out there.
Yeah. Well, Terry, thank you for being here on the show. Terry Whalin, again, is our guest. 10 publishing myths. Really. In a good way, a quick read, very readable. It says on the back, I don't think I've ever seen this on a book before, read time 108 minutes.
Yeah, it's something that Morgan James is doing with their books to add that in there. And I do have a special offer, Mark, for everybody to be able to get this book easily. They can go to publishingoffer.com, and that'll take you to my site where they can get the book for like $10, including the shipping, along with over $200 of bonuses. So I really want people to do that, read the book, mark it up, get the value from it. I also have an 11th myth, Mark.
Yeah, I was going to,
when I did the book, Alice Kreider, who was the acquisitions editor at Cook Communications, told me, she said, Terry, you're missing the 11th myth. I'm like, okay, Alice, what's the 11th myth? I'll bite. She says, well, the 11th myth should be that if I send my book to Oprah, she'll book me on her show. And I'm like, well, yeah, that's a really good myth, Alice. Yeah. And so what I decided to do is I actually wrote that chapter. And when we designed the book, It's exactly like the rest of the book. So you can get that free from me if you go to terrylinks.com/11th myth, 11th myth.
Yeah.
That'll take you there, and you can get that completely free from me. So
Yeah. So hope people will check that out. A lot of really helpful tips, whether you're wanting to be a first time author, or even if you've been through this a couple of times. There's always something to learn, and I think this is really great. So again, Terry Whalin, you can go to publishingoffer.com, go to terrylinks.com/11th myth. I'll put these in the show notes. Those are good URLs.
yeah, I try to make it easy for people. I think that's one of the keys too, is to have the right place that you're sending people, and then do that consistently over and over.
Yeah, or I should have called it, my mistake, a domain name. It was both a URL, but having, especially if you're going to be on podcasts, verbally easy domain names. You don't have to spell Whalin. I'll do it, Whalin, but terrylinks.com. That's a good one. So lots of great tips embedded, even in the way you're going about this, as you're leading by example, Terry. So thank you so much for being here on the podcast today.
Thank you, Mark, for the opportunity. I really do appreciate it. And one last thing I'd like to tell people is I've been in some of the top literary agencies and editor offices in New York City. I've visited with these people, and what they won't tell you is that they may be rejecting you. They may be saying no to your submissions, but they're actively looking every single day. They're asking me when I go there. It's like, okay, Terry, where's the next best-selling book? Where's the next Joel Osteen? How can I meet that guy?
Yeah.
And so do know that no matter what they're telling you, they are actively reading their email, looking at their physical mail. They're actively looking for that next diamond in the rough out there. You just have to keep pitching yourself and get in the right place at the right time.
Yeah. Well, thank you for that last bonus tip, Terry. And thank you for doing this, and best wishes to you and all your writing and publishing and all your work. Thanks again.
Thank you, Mark.